الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين وبعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says after Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informing us about that which was revealed to the last and final messenger, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, salawatullahi alayhi wa salamuh. He tells us that the Quran, that which we follow, the framework of guidance, has no doubt about it, no doubt within it. It is certain, certainly sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and certain in that which it contains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the last and final messenger as an example of the Quran. And many times from this minbar, the question has been asked, what is the difference between us and the Sahaba? And the answer has been given. It's not that the Sahaba had the Prophet ﷺ, because if success followed a condition that the Prophet had to be present, then no one would be successful in their endeavors for Islam after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And history shows us that the Sahaba spread the wings of Islam east and west after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. So what's the difference? The difference is the application and the relationship and the attachment to that which the Prophet ﷺ was sent with, Al-Quran. That which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about it, لا ريب فيه. There is no doubt about it or within it. It's certainly sent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges those who have any doubts about it in various places in the Quran to bring a verse or a surah similar to that contained within the Quran. And this is a test which has stood the test of time and will stand the test of time until the end of time itself. Quraysh, whom were the best in the Arabic language, did not even attempt to repeat a verse or a surah similar to that contained within the Quran. And those that did were mocked and were not taken seriously by Quraysh themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us this book, and there are various ahadith relating to the book that speak about its virtue, that speak about those who attach themselves to it, etc. And we have to reflect upon our relationship with the Quran in this time today, in our time today. Do I have a relationship with the Quran? Number one. Do I recite the Quran? Do I know what is contained within the Quran? And before that, perhaps even the question, can I recite the Quran? Can I recite the Quran? Al-Shaykh Al-Mi'sarawi, he said something which is very eye-opening recently. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when describing the believers, those whom He is pleased with, from the Sahaba and other than them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are oft in remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whilst sitting, standing, laying down on their sides, etc. And He said, if you would like to understand what this would look like, look at our relationship with our phones. We scroll on our phones whilst we're standing, whilst we're sitting, whilst we're laying down. Do we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the daytime? And the best form of dhikr is to recite ad-dhikr, to read the remembrance. Al-Quran, one of its names, ad-dhikr. Why? Because it reminds us of the reality of this life and where we're heading into the akhirah. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, a person will stand in front of Allah, the Qari will stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he will be told, اقرأ وارقى ورتل كما كنت في الدنيا فإن آخر منزلتك في الجنة آخر آية تقرأها أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. It will be said to the Qari, read, recite, and go up in grades, go up in stations in paradise. For the final place that you will rest in paradise, your final abode in paradise will be in accordance to the last verse that you recite. And some of the ulama, when explaining this hadith, they mentioned that there is an athar, there is a report, that the stations of Jannah are in accordance to the number of verses in the Quran. And so the Qari, for every ayah that he recites, he goes up a station in paradise. For every verse that he recites, he goes up a station in paradise. And if you think about it, this sounds like a shortcut. This sounds like a shortcut. To what? To attain Jannah. Why are we here? To attain Jannah. How so? Through seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a shortcut. Memorize the Quran and keep hold of what you've memorized. And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you will recite that which you've memorized, and your station will be in accordance to the last verse that you've recited. We say that we want Jannah. If you ask the Muslim, would you like Jannah? He says, yes, of course. No Muslim will say that they want to go to the hellfire. Every Muslim wants to and hopes to go to paradise. Likewise, most people, if you ask them, do you want some wealth? Do you want money? They say yes. No person says, I don't want money, except a very few. But when we say we want money, what do? We work for it. When we say we want Jannah, do we work for it? Do we put time aside for it? This is one of the means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. It's not to say that every single person can and will memorize the Quran. It's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at least we should try. Have that aspiration. Teach our children the importance of the Quran, the importance of memorizing the Quran, the importance of reciting the Quran. And there are various factors to be considered when we speak about our relationship with the Quran. Number one, it's recitation, of course. And that starts with the ability to recite. The ability to recite. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say something which is quite harsh. But I don't believe, except for some, that there is any excuse here for us in the UK at least to not be able to recite the Quran. I don't believe that anyone can say they don't have the opportunity to learn how to recite the Quran properly. At the very least, Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha. The ulama, the fuqaha, they are in general agreement, although they may differ to the extent of what I'm about to say, but they are in general agreement. The one who does not recite Surah Al-Fatiha properly, his salah is questionable. His salah is questionable. So does that mean that if I can't recite Surah Al-Fatiha properly, my prayer is invalid? If I'm not attempting to learn, some of the fuqaha would say so, yes. That's how grave the matter is. That's how serious the matter is, recitation of the Quran. And every single person here in the UK, except for a few, to every rule there is an exemption, to every generalization there is an exemption. But every person, most, have the opportunity to learn how to recite the Quran properly. Now you do not even have to leave your home. You do not even have to leave your home. There are brothers that spend $25 a month to recite to a teacher in Egypt 3 or 4 times a week. $25 a month. Very cheap. We spend $25 a month, which is the equivalent to what? 22, 23 pounds. If we really look at what most of us are spending our money on, we spend it on things that we don't need to actually spend it on. The Quran is a necessity. It's our framework, God-given. I should not excuse myself in not being able to recite the Quran. Another excuse that some may say, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I'm working. I have a family. Do you have time for social media? Do you have time to read the news? Do you have time to watch videos on YouTube? Do you have time for entertainment? If you do, then you have time for the Quran. You have time. The third, I don't feel well. I'm stressed. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. I don't feel like I can do it. The sick person doesn't like to take the medicine at first, but when they realize how much the medicine benefits them, they start to take it. Likewise, for us, when we have sicknesses of the heart and the mind, the Quran is a cure. The Quran is a cure. Sometimes I have to force myself to take my medicine, which is likewise with the Quran. Sometimes I may have to force myself to read it. I don't want to go to work every day. I don't sit at home and say, no, I'm feeling sick today. I'm feeling down. I'm feeling tired. I don't feel like going to work. No, I don't do that. I go to work. Why? Because I know that there are consequences if I don't go to work. Likewise, there are consequences if I do not develop a relationship of some sort with the Quran. Yes, there is a time to be soft on a case-to-case situation, individual situation. A person can take their time in learning, go in accordance to their ability, etc. But I should not be excusing myself. I should not be excusing myself. The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us what? That for every harf that is recited in the Quran is a hasana. And what did he say? He doesn't mean alif lam mim harf, walakin alifun harf, wa lamun harf, wa mimun harf. For every letter in the Quran, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ ذا لا كا ألف لام كا تا آ با أجر حسنات. And the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us in another hadith, every hasana that a Muslim acquires by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and grace is worth 10 hasanat, 10 rewards. So let's give the equivalent in pounds. Let's say a person told us, if you read this book, I will give you £1 per letter. £1 per letter. We won't even say 10. Those who cannot read will learn to read. They will learn to read. Why? Because there is tangible reward. They will learn to read. They won't make the excuse. Here in the UK and in Europe, we go through the education system for how long? For some, 20 years of their life. For others, 25. What for? Because we hope, for most of us, although education should not be sought for the sake of career and acquirement of financial stability, etc. But the point is, we hope that what? At the end of my education, I will receive a career, a means of making money. Likewise with the Quran. It's a means of receiving reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us about the person who passes away, everything follows him into the grave except for what? His ajr. Everything, doesn't follow him into the grave except for his ajr. His family follows him, his wealth follows him, but they don't enter into the grave with him. Only his ajr enters the grave. The house that I may purchase, the car that I may drive, the clothes that I may wear, the status that I may acquire, the names that I'm given, the qualifications that I earn, the friends that I have, none of them go into the grave with me. The only thing that goes into the grave is what? Reward, ajr. And if I don't have ajr, sayyi'at. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and guide us. We are, for some, going through difficult times, yes, but we are also a people, we like to excuse ourselves too often. The reality is, first world problems. For many of us, not all, but for many of us, first world problems. We like to feel sorry for ourselves, we like to excuse ourselves. But we actually have to pull our socks up and start to work. If I want something, I have to earn it. If I cannot read the Quran, I should not feel sorry for myself for not being able to read the Quran. I should find a teacher. You don't have to pay to find teachers for the Quran these days. Many masajid have halaqat in the Quran. Teachers, they charge minimum for the Quran in comparison to other things. Many of us, we have family members that can teach the Quran. Here from this masjid, walillahi alhamd, we have brothers and sisters that entered into Islam a year or two ago and they can now recite the Quran with proficiency. We have in fact those that entered into Islam 1 or 2 years ago and now they are able to understand the Arabic language better than some who were born as Arabs. And that's not an exaggeration. If we want something, we can acquire it. We have to put our mind and our efforts into it though. The question we have to ask ourselves, how much do I want it? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَ. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. خَيْرُكُمْ, speaking to who? To the Sahaba. And then us, the best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. There's no one better than the muallim. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the entire dunya is cursed. And everything in it, except for the teacher, the student, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that which leads to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ أَقْوَامًا وَيَضَعُ بِهِ آخَرِينَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this book raises people. And with it, he debases and lowers others. Today we're impressed by individuals who can speak well, who earn well. We're impressed by people who have large amount of followers and so on and so forth, status, fame, etc. We're impressed by sports personalities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impressed by who? The one who learns the Quran and teaches it. The one who dedicates himself to the recitation of the Quran, who develops an attachment to the Quran. If we were to lose our sight, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our sight, we would regret not looking at the Quran. We would regret not looking at the Quran. If we were to lose our tongues, we would regret not reciting the Quran. And if we were to lose our hearing, we would regret the times that we didn't listen to the Quran. Because when you lose something, you appreciate what it actually was that you had. We don't want to be in that situation. When we pass away from this life, we will look back and say, if only I read the Quran more. For every letter, 10 hasanat. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases a person's hasanah 70, 700 to an infinite times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants, can reward a person for one page of the Quran as if he recited the entire Quran. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الذي يقرأ القرآن وهو ماهر فيه أو ماهر به مع السفرة الكرام البررة. The one who recites the Quran and he is a master in its recitation. He has perfected its recitation. He is with the angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises his status. And the one يتتعتع فيه, he finds it difficult to recite the Quran. He has difficulty in its pronunciation, in its recitation. له أجران. He has 2 rewards. 2 rewards for the effort and the recitation. And a person cannot become a mahir in the Quran until he's gone through the stage of making mistakes and finding it difficult, etc. What excuse do we have? At the very least, Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha. My Fatiha should be to the best that I can recite it to. There's always room for improvement. There are some letters, for some, an entire lifetime is necessary to improve the recitation, the pronunciation. But I should be putting my best effort into it. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, اقرأوا القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه ولصاحبه. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, read the Quran because on Yawm al-Qiyamah it will be an interceder, an intercessor for the person who used to recite it. The person who used to recite it. So thinking about that now, ask a question. When was the last time I read the Quran? When was the last time that I actually opened a mushaf and read the Quran? When was the last time that I tried to understand something in the Quran? Unfortunately, for many of us, the last time we read the Quran was in Ramadan. Unfortunately, that's the reality. We only read the Quran during Ramadan. And that's still something which is praiseworthy, to have a reading of the Quran in Ramadan. But Ramadan is not the only month of Quran. The Quran was not only revealed for the month of Ramadan. For those that cannot recite the Quran, today they should start to consider looking for someone or a program, a teacher, whether online, offline, a family member that can teach them how to recite the Quran. They should look for that, and they should not make excuses for themselves. For those that do not read the Quran, but they have the ability to, consider the feeling you would have if that gift of being able to recite the Quran were to be taken away. If I can read the Quran, I need to be reading a portion of the Quran daily, even if it's just half a page, regardless how much. I need to be reciting the Quran. And the one who recites the Quran daily will find barakah in his life or her life, and they will find ease in their affairs. They will find tranquility and peace in their heart. And don't take my word for it. It's not my word. It's the word of the ulama that came before us. The word of the awliya that experienced through their relationship of the Quran, the barakah that a person can receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And try it. Try it. Read a page a day, half a page a day. If you can read properly and proficiently, half a juz. A juz. We are raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to the Quran. The Sahaba were raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to their application of the Quran. And if without an attachment to the Quran, if we leave off the Quran, we will be debased. We will be debased. And perhaps there is some explanation for the situation that we find ourselves in globally. Although, walillah alhamd, Islam is on the rise, and young people are coming to Islam, and old people are coming to Islam too. But Islam is on the rise, alhamdulillah. But we are still in a difficult situation in many ways. Perhaps the reason for that is because we do not have a relationship with the Quran. And the deeper relationship with the Quran that we need to aspire toward is, of course, its application. Its application. But in order to apply, we have to first develop a relationship with and understand. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا حسد إلا في اثنتين رجل آتاه الله القرآن فيتلوه آناء الليل والنهار. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, there's no hasad, there's no envy that a person should feel or that is permitted to feel except in two people. Number one, the person whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given recitation of the Quran, and he reads it day and night. And this hadith lets us know that the one who is given the Quran, the one who is able to recite the Quran, the one who is able to memorize the Quran, this is a gift given to that person by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The years that they spend learning were years given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ability to be patient, the ability to be dedicated, the ability to be disciplined, this was all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so rather than feeling proud, they should feel humbled. And they should feel indebted. And we are of course all indebted, but further indebted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving him something which is not given to everyone. And likewise, anyone who receives an education in Islam. مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, He gives him comprehension, understanding, education in Islam, the deen. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَرَجَلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ مَالًا فَهُوَ يُنْفِقُهُ آنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ وَآنَاءَ النَّهَارِ. A person who is given wealth by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he spends it day and night for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. These are the two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, informing us about the framework, have told us we can feel jealousy. We should feel jealousy. But the permitted jealousy that we can feel is not to wish that this person didn't have the gift that they have, but to wish that we had the same as them. To wish that we had the same as them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told us that the best of us are those who memorize, recite, learn the Quran and teach it to others, which is not only about the best of us in this dunya, but the best of us in the akhirah, as we mentioned. And there are 3 or 4 aspects to be taken into consideration when it comes to our relationship with the Quran. Do we recite it? Do we memorize it? Do we understand it? Do we apply it? But regardless of what we discuss, which aspect we think about, the first step is to develop a relationship with it. Meaning, I should have a portion daily that I read, that I listen to if I cannot read, until I can read. I find someone who can teach me, and I understand that it's a gift and likewise an amana, a responsibility. And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, we may be questioned. We may be questioned. For those of us that live in the luxury of having time for leisure, we may be questioned. Leisure meaning free time. Why did you not recite the Quran? And a person can answer that question to themselves. Why did I not recite the Quran? Because I didn't have time. Is that true? No. Because I didn't have the ability to find a teacher. Is that true? No. Because I was incapable. Is that true? No. I studied many other things in my life. I didn't have health. Is that true? No. We need to develop a relationship with the Quran. The Quran was sent to change mankind. Sent to change mankind. We are the ambassadors of the Quran. Therefore, we should know it and develop a relationship with it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make that the case. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people that read the Quran, apply the Quran, memorize the Quran, teach the Quran, and recite it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our last and final place in Jannah the last and final verse of the Quran. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وارض اللهم عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر أصحابك أجمعين. اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا واجعلنا من أهل القرآن يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل تلاوة الكتاب وتطبيقه يا مجيب الدعوات. اللهم اجعلنا من المعلمين كتابك والمعلمين. وأقم الصلاة.